Welcome, folks. Welcome to the next round of Red Beard Lives. We're starting off today, which, as I look at the clock, is the 15th of October with Meseidy. Welcome to the show, Meseidy.
Thank you for having me, Brian.
And what we're talking today is about tribes and tribalism, but particularly about women and tribes. And I'm curious. Well, I want to tell a backstory before we dive into your topic, which is I have been part of my local mountaineering club for a while, 8 years maybe. And I was an assistant instructor teaching one of the snow days where we do a lot of, after you graduate, you go back and you volunteer. I realize I'm going to move my mic a little closer. You come back and you volunteer. And so I'm up there volunteering to go teach snow skills, whatever. And this is back in 2015 or 2016. I think it was 2016, that spring. And you already know where the story's going, where there's a couple of us that we just start chatting, and it comes up the idea of censorship.
Yes.
Because we just had the big meeting of all the Mountaineers, which is a nonpartisan organization, but it's based out of Seattle. And we had the keynote speaker leading everyone and laughing at people who vote any different way than they would, and really ostracizing
like a large contingent of your community.
Yeah, but of course, if you point anything out, then you're going to get pushed farther away from being connected to the tribe. But we're not there to discuss politics. We're there to climb mountains. And so I was there at this training day, and me and these two other guys who were also assistant instructors, sort of off on the side, we started chatting in, hushed tones about, what are you seeing in your group? I mean, down in Olympia, up in Everett, what are you seeing in your group? And we talked about, that there's a lot of stuff you can't talk about. And there's been another occasion with the same group where when it was just a few of us and we weren't in the big group, we're like, so how do you feel about, everything being politicized? Isn't it weird? Like, if you don't vote the same way as other people, then suddenly you're ostracized. And it's weird because we just want to climb mountains. All of us just want to climb mountains. And yet the tribe ends up getting polluted with politics. So I'm curious with your experience, and it's bad for guys, but I wonder what it's like for women to have that experience where you have the thing you love and then it gets polluted with politics. Gotta get in the frame here. It gets polluted with politics. And then you're like, you can't just go do the thing you love. Walk us through what in the world's going on there.
Well, I think in general, it's not, we're having a discussion here about women and men's relationships and stuff, but it's definitely something that's happening in both worlds, And it's just taking different forms because typically, if you want to go with traditional behaviors, men tend to voice themselves a little bit more as opposed to women tend to be a little bit more agreeable. And so that sort of thing either happens slower or it happens more passively. So in my experience, I'm a food blogger. I was a food blogger for 10 years. Before that, I was a legal assistant. And so oddly enough, politics and news and that sort of thing has always been an interest of mine. So I've always been relatively pretty well informed, even though I was doing food blogging. And the food blogging industry is primarily, I would say it's like 90% women, and like, I can think of maybe 5 guys that are also in the realm, and they pretty much are the only 5 guys that I can remember for a long time. You know what I mean? So I've had a lot of that female focused dynamic, and it made its way also into that industry, just where you were trying to go to what do you call them, conferences, or you go to retreats, you go to outings, and you would notice that people would gather together and they would have these kind of discussions, and they would do the same thing. They would, call people out. They would kind of make fun of them if they had a certain view. And then when you find yourself either, and here's the thing, it's not necessarily that you are in that other group that they're making fun of, but maybe you're in a group in the middle where you're like, this doesn't feel right. Like, we shouldn't be making fun of people, or we shouldn't be ostracizing them or demonizing them because of their views. So it's not, a lot of people like to make it as like an either or. And I think there is actually a very large contingent that is a little bit more like, I would have a problem if the other side was doing it too. You know what I mean? And there has been, and this happens generally, like both sides will do that. And so what ends up happening is that those people also kind of get put off, you know what I mean? And they feel kind of ostracized because maybe they agree with your views, but they don't agree with how you're like how you're vocalizing them or the behaviors that you're following. So with women in general, it was the same thing. You just have like this weird kind of hush. And then what would happen, and I've had a lot of girlfriends that have come to me, and I run a women's community that's founded on values, on 3 core values of femininity, self-reliance, and freedom. And with those values, we at least know that we share the same values and we can have discussions about how to reach them and how to live them out. And we may not agree on everything, but because one of our values is freedom, we can be free and we can feel comfortable like sharing our opinions. And that what was happening was that a lot of the ladies in my community had experiences where they did start to question. And I mean, I don't know how men are, but you know, my thought is that typically men will just kind of be like, they'll call you out, they'll tell you you're wrong. It's a little bit more confrontational. And that, or the other strategy is like, you just get ghosted. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So suddenly these people that you're texting with and that you're reaching out to just kind of fall off the face of the earth. And I think what happened for a long time is that we were in a world where we were like allowed to have generally the same interest without having to really worried about any kind of real deep discussions. And I'm a person that I don't deal well with small talk or superficial conversation. So eventually I have always had like a small core of people that you're going to know where I stand. You're going to know my opinion because I'm not here to talk about the weather or knitting. I like to have a conversation or a dialogue, you know, and I absolutely love dialogues that don't necessarily agree with me 100% because I think those are more interesting.
It's diversity of thought, the only kind of diversity that matters. If
Yeah.
you give me, it's one of the crazy things. We started sometime recently deciding that who we voted for president was the most interesting thing about us. Whereas all of us, if you took everyone who voted like you would find some horrible people. Everyone.
Oh, for sure.
There's awful people. There's awful people who look like you. There's awful people who have your same beliefs about whatever. And we decided that we're going to go claim that as our team instead of who are you as a human. I'm just going to take this not even 1% of who you are and say, that's who you are. That's it.
And
it's insane.
It was a discussion, actually. We had this same topic. We had this discussion with the ladies within my community. And because we do a bi-weekly meeting where we pick a topic and we have like a true dialogue. And one of these, the same topic came up. And I wonder if this kind of simplistic categorization is really a byproduct of how we are consuming information now. Information is now broken down and simplified. It's given to us in tidbits and like
when there's
little
too much
pieces. And then
there's too much where
exactly.
Even looking at one issue at which friends could potentially break up over, abortion, that the simple way to say it is it's good or it's bad. Whereas the level of nuance involved is insane.
Yeah. Like
and so to say, well, you're pro or you're anti, and that's who you are. Well, and then if someone says that, they're like, are you with me or against me? Like, well, if you're saying, are you with me or against me? I'm probably against you because you're a dick. And apparently now, I think back during the Bush years, I was cool with my friends because I was anti-war. And then during the Obama years, I was a racist because I was anti-war. And then during the Trump years, I was evil. No, wait, I was good again. I've forgotten already. But now Biden's in charge, and now I'm evil again. I'm probably racist because I'm anti-war. And like there's a not small contingent of people, and I've lost a number of lifelong friends because I was consistently anti-war, and they didn't think that was cool when there was a black guy dropping the bombs.
Yeah, well, and I think that is an interesting thing because right now there's a lot of discussion about finding your community, finding your tribe, and which I am totally a proponent of that. But there's a difference between finding your community or finding your tribe versus tribalism. It's two Like it's two
Ooh,
different things.
I need a drink for that of my water.
And what
Hold on. We got to replay what you just said. There's a difference between finding and choosing your tribe versus tribalism.
Yes, I believe
Okay.
that. Because what you were describing there, like where depending on who was in office, there you were designated good or bad because your views depended on who was in office or where that individual's political standing or alliance allowed. And I think, that is a side effect of tribalism, as opposed to you can I have way more respect for someone who can remain consistent in their beliefs and in their values, and that they're not going to fluctuate depending on what is going on politically or in any other department or category outside of themselves. Because then I start to question how founded or how established are you actually in your beliefs and in your views, because you're letting them be affected by an outside influence.
One of the most fun ways to melt someone's brain who doesn't know, isn't really in the gun community, is to say, who is better for gun rights, Trump or Obama? And the people who aren't really in the gun community would say, well, Trump, obviously. And then you can say, actually, Trump illegally banned bump stocks, which he has no legal right to do. Whereas under Obama, I got the right to concealed carry in national parks. So actually, Obama was better for gun rights than Trump.
Yes.
And if I'm a single issue voter, I'm voting Obama all the way. And people go like, oh my God, what? Because the nuance of that, if you're actually against whoever the president is just taking your rights because they feel like it, in this one particular case, you're actually completely Obama and you're completely against Trump. Because he's a dictator and Obama was a friendly guy to gun rights, which there's a lot of nuance there. And then you have to explain it right. Whereas if you're just, this person's good, that person's evil, then it's easy. Whereas if you're saying like, in these particular ways, this person's better, and in these particular ways, this person, like the conversation is exhausting. And that's just on one topic.
Well, and then you have to weigh, like, I think every individual prioritizes different things, you know what I mean? And different things are important to them. And there are some issues that you have to choose your battles. You can't, it's like in a relationship or in a marriage. I can't, like every single thing, I can't be going to battle about it and getting angry about it. I have to choose what is going to have the largest effect on my life. And what I prioritize is not necessarily what you're going to prioritize. That does not make you better or less than anyone else, and I think we have really lost that ability to understand that. You know what I mean? It's just, everything is just so simplified and so overly digested. And then at the same time, with all of those things, we may disagree on those items, but there has to be a consistent thread of of values that we agree on. So like in regards to, we're talking about firearms, I'm pro-gun. I am a woman, and I think that is probably a huge issue for women. I think we should be way more invested in rights when it comes to firearms. Is it my only issue? No. But, I am focused on that because for me, it's an issue about my freedom. Like, I think it's vital in order for me to be able to maintain my freedom. And someone might disagree with me on that. And we can have that discussion about their disagreement, but ultimately they might be taking a different view in regards to the value of freedom. Do you understand what I'm saying? So at least if we're disagreeing, I know that at their core, we're just disagreeing on how to accomplish that value or how to prop that value up. Of course, I think they're wrong if they're trying to take it away from me, but that's a discussion to be had.
It's a different live stream.
That's a whole other thing.
It comes to tolerance for priorities being different.
Yeah.
That if let's say we had two policies we could vote for, and you're going to vote for the policy that supports more women owning firearms, and I'm going to vote for the policy, let's say, that strengthens our border against illegal aliens. And these policies happen to have some aspects that are contradictory because the world is rarely this or that. And being okay, like, oh yeah, you care about this more than that, and I care about this thing over here more than what you care about. That's reasonable. But take us to the next step, which is for forming healthy tribes that are less captured by ideology and more founded on some values, which I like how John Robb phrases this, and I forgot the exact phrase he uses, but the minimum feature set. Instead of maximalist tribes where you must agree on everything or you are ostracized, it's what is the absolute minimum? He's talking about digital rights with this as well. That what's the absolute minimum rule set we can have in which we can all do our thing instead of the whole everything which is not forbidden is compulsory reality that for some tribes, like with the mountaineering tribe, if you want to speak up, I guess you could, and we're not going to technically kick you out for saying anything that is not in the orthodoxy. But I don't know, you might not get that leadership position. It's like are people really going to want to go climbing with you and trust you if you don't support whoever we say you should support? So back to my actual question, which is minimum rule sets. What are you doing inside your community to go and have this minimum rule set, but then have the tolerance for diversity of thought when we're seeing so much intolerance towards diversity in the rest of society?
Well, I mean, first of all, if you visit my website, you can kind of get a grasp of what it is specifically within our community that we share our values on. And that's really at our core. All I ask of the ladies that join is that we can agree on these objective truths and these values. And we can kind of have debates, especially, as women. There's a lot of discussion in regards to relationships with men. You know what I mean? And so we can have these discussions on marriages and relationships with men. And, I'm a traditionalist. I have a very traditional relationship, and there's like a trigger word that within traditional relationships of like submission. And there's a big misunderstanding of what that means. There's like this belief, and we've had these discussions, and I had a fellow member that didn't agree with me, and we had a debate about it. And I tried to explain my position. It's not about me knowing my place. It's about me trusting, and our relationship is healthy, that if push comes to shove and there's a final decision, I'm going to follow the decision that he makes. Now, our relationship, that has been a rare occasion, but that's the thing that I'm prepared for. And so we kind of had that kind of discussion. Now, one of our foundations here, or one of our values, is femininity. And a lot of people will understand and think that femininity is like bows and pink and dresses and
Barbie.
No, yeah, like no. I mean, I'm the founding member, or I'm the founder here, and if anybody's watching this live, you can tell that I don't typically like follow that traditional mold. But it is an acknowledgement that, we as women have innate abilities, you know what I mean? That our relationship with men is not always at war, but is in fact complementary, and that these are good things for society. So now what shape that takes in your personal life the decision is up to you, whether you want to be a woman who stays home and raises her children. No person or no woman should be shamed for the choice that they make in order for them to be fulfilled in their lives. So
that is an inflammatory statement in 2021.
Imagine that.
Funny.
And then, like, if you're a mother,
say it again, just to trigger people, say it again.
I was like, no woman should be shamed to take a path that makes them fulfilled in their life, that they choose for themselves. And there's this perception that if a woman, and it's both ways, because women, and this is another thing, like you'll see it on my website, it's like, I do not put up with any mom shaming, clickiness, I don't do it. No. I will call it out. I don't like it. And I think a lot of the ladies, we have almost 20 members now because we're brand new. But they appreciate that. And it's an interesting thread that I've seen that's pretty consistent. But we also have, we have stay-at-home homeschooling mothers, and we also have career women that are in finance or handling millions of dollars, you know what I mean? And our mothers. And they too should not be shamed in choosing to work, or how, what it is that they choose that fulfills them as women and in their lives. And there just seems to be, especially from the outside, it's this either or. You know what I mean? So if you're really traditionalist and you're working outside the home, then it's like, well, how dare you? Like, I couldn't imagine being away from my children. And then the other way is like, if you just choose to stay home and raise your children, you're like, it's this idea of you're not really fulfilling yourself, or these kids and this lifestyle is holding you back from your full potential. What do you know, and why do you care?
I think we're going to change your tagline for your membership to tolerance, diversity, and inclusion, because you're talking about really being tolerant of different people's perspectives and including people who have different values. That there's some women who staying home with their kids would be the worst possible, that's not, and they could do it, but it would be horrible. And there's some women who leaving their kids at home to go work for someone else would be horrible.
And I do believe that generally, and you know what's interesting, especially talking with women, because of course I have the women in my own community, but I have my Instagram platform and I talk to many other women. And what I have seen pretty consistently, oddly enough, along with this pandemic, is the fact that, and on my podcast, I had this discussion in my first 2 episodes with both the women that I interviewed, which, by the way, the podcast is It's Meseidy. But anyways, we've had these discussions that during the pandemic and during this downtime, when you were able to take time and just be quiet and not have to run the wheel that society has been telling them to run, of being like, running a business or being a boss babe or doing whatever, when they really came to look at it, they were able to evaluate what they truly wanted, as opposed to what they were being told they should want as women. And some of them opted to stay home and are appreciative of being able to be in a position to stay home. Some of them decided to go and venture out and kind of like, they're still working, but it's taking them in a different path, in something that they actually feel more purpose in. And
you remind me of Netflix, where Netflix said our greatest competitor is sleep. That as long as they can keep you from listening to yourself, Netflix wins. But as soon as you listen to yourself, you might choose your own path, which may or may not be binging the next season.
Exactly.
And sometimes it is, and it's glorious, and 4 a.m. comes to you like, this was the best decision ever, and then you fall over. And sometimes you say, it's 7 p.m. and it's time for me to go to bed. Thank you.
Yes. And you actually need to spend some time with yourself. And that was something that I found really interesting. And in regards to your tolerance comment, I think it's very important that we distinguish that tolerance is putting up with things you don't agree with, as opposed to tolerance being that they agree with what I'm saying or they don't, they are therefore not tolerant, which is kind of how the world is kind of shaping itself into right now. And of course, like, there's a difference between being tolerant of someone that is going to affect your well-being or your livelihood, you know what I mean, your freedoms. And that can get into a little bit of a nuance, because then there's these, the claim, like, we can have those debates, but ultimately, especially like your life, versus being tolerant of someone that just has a different view than you, a different life, and being able to understand when that is the case, like when it's different, of like, it's actually making an effect on you personally, like on your life and your family's life, versus it's something that they just don't disagree with, but you're taking it personally as an effect on your life. Do you understand what I'm saying? I had a great
conversation with a neighbor yesterday where we were talking about all these things we agreed on, and then she said something that I didn't agree with, and I said, well, this right here is just yet more proof that Malcolm X was right. And she sort of looked at me, and I said, well, a reporter asked Malcolm X, what do you think of MLK Jr.? And Malcolm X, who had already gone on his Hajj, already entered into the chilled out stage of his life where he's no longer the violent guy that he was before he went on the Hajj. He said, say again?
No, I'm said yes.
He said, I don't think you could find 2 men in this entire country who agree on everything. I thought, hot damn. If Malcolm X can say that about MLK Jr., with whom he had real differences. And the thing, have you read his autobiography, Malcolm X?
I have not.
It's an amazing book. Now, of course, it's an autobiography, so who knows how realistic it is. But one of the most, besides that, which I think I read in that book, he said, so he used to be a really angry black supremacist, right? Muslim black supremacist. That changed when he went on the Hajj, because he went to Mecca. And what he writes in his book is, I saw for the first time that Muslims are of every skin color. And he looked around and he saw Muslims that were so pale as to be white. And he looked at them, and he looked at them through God's eyes, and he saw, and his just whole brain changed about tolerance and diversity. If you'd asked him before he went on the Hajj about MLK Jr., he probably would have heard something different. But I think, okay, how can we embody that? You have MLK saying, I have a dream, content of character, not color of skin. Then you have Malcolm X saying, there's no two men who agree on everything. Like, okay, we need to embody these people some more.
Well, and I just think that that's just something that's been lost. Like, there's just been such, like, I mean, in regards to skin color and, you know, religion, my personal experience is I'm Puerto Rican, I'm of Latin descent. I don't meet the stereotype that people in this is something very unique or pretty distinct to the United States and many Western countries, is that focus on, you know, your skin color means you believe this, or that you have this view, or you should have this view. And I've experienced that a lot as a Puerto Rican or as a Latin woman, that I have been dismissed because I don't appear a certain way. So therefore my experience is minimized when I am like firstborn off island. You know what I mean? Like, it's, you know, it's something I'm very proud of. I have a great deal of appreciation of where I come from. And I also recognize, being from Puerto Rico, the conflict and the issues between or the relationship with the United States. But am I going to demonize an entire population because of my country's relationship with the United States? Do you understand what I'm saying? And that's, and then also the fact that a lot of people like push or reflect onto me what my views or my experience should be, depending on the way that I look.
You ought to believe this. If you were really a Puerto Rican.
And it's just kind of like, it's very frustrating. Or even, you know, being online. I've had an online presence for about 10 years through my food blog, and my bread and butter are my Puerto Rican recipes. And then I would share something on Facebook, and someone who does not follow me and doesn't know me would be like, why is this white lady posting about Puerto Rican recipes? I'm like, yes, I am white, because being Latin is not a race. It's like Latin, first of all, is just like in a general all-encompassing description of a bunch of different countries. A Puerto Rican has very, I mean, besides our closeness in our language, like Mexico and Puerto Rico are completely different cultures, different experiences, but we're both, you know, of Latin descent. You know what I mean? But you still can't, you know, generalize us.
Unless you're an American and you feel like you have the ability to see into everyone else's soul by looking at their skin color.
Exactly. And so that
brings us back to tribalism.
Exactly, which is exactly where I was about to go, is that it's this assumption of you should think a certain way, you should believe a certain way, you should have certain views, depending on who you vote for or depending on how you look. And I'm like, if anything is going to set us up to be more divided, this is like a perfect formula for that. Or to be more not only divided, but more fearful of speaking up. You know what I mean? And also I think the problem to that is that we've also become a society that is uncomfortable with being uncomfortable.
You said fearful for speaking up. I want to go share one last story on that. So in this climbing club, I was doing a mentor lead of a climb. So I was leading it, but there was a senior member there who was watching me and ready to correct me, but I was leading the thing. And we got partway up this place called Mount Daniel. It's the tallest mountain in King County. It's a serious glaciated mountain. Not nearly as serious as Mount Rainier, but it's sort of long and sort of dangerous. And every time we got around a new ridge getting closer to where the glacier was, the wind picked up, the rain picked up, and we're at this point, everyone's soaked, so our waterproof clothing because of sweat and rain and wind, you eventually get cold and wet. And we meet up, the four of us, me, my one assistant leader who's a tall guy like me, and then another assistant leader who's a short woman, and then the mentor. And we say, okay, so are we going to keep on going or are we going to turn around? Because everyone's wet and we're not to the glacier yet, but we can see it. So we're on our way. And all the guys are like, yeah, this seems reasonable. And then the woman, the short woman, the short non-white woman, the Jewish woman, she says, I don't know, but okay. And I say, well, what do you mean? And within a minute, all three of us tall white guys are completely convinced by the short Jewish woman that this is a terrible idea, because once she was willing to share, we're like, that's a really good point. If someone does fall in a crevasse and then we have to spend half an hour to get them out because they have a broken ankle, and then how are we actually going to get them off when everyone's already cold and wet and there's going to be more? There's all these reasons, which as soon as she started to point out, like, oh yeah, the story gets better. So we turn around because she was right. We all turn around to go back to our camp, pack up. We're going down the mountain. We have our after action meeting before we get back to the cars. And we talk about what happened up there. And in the Mountaineers, we're all about talking about our experiences and how we make decisions, because decision making is way more important than almost anything else. That's how you get yourself killed, is you make bad decisions. And on the way down, I heard one woman climber, one of the participants, talking to another one and saying she also had a bad feeling about this, but didn't want to speak up. Two women on that trip of the 11 of us or so thought this was a bad idea. Neither one wanted to speak up. And one of them spoke up only because, and she barely did. She just said, I don't think it's a good idea, but okay.
Yeah,
and
it was a tone thing. It wasn't that she actually spoke up. It's that
I had to go ask her. And so we talked about it later. And I said, hey, I think that, and to her, to the assistant leader, said, I think that this is because you're a short woman. And she really pushed back against that, which is interesting, because to me it was obvious that here she is with the most clear understanding of what's happening. The most clear. And then another woman on the trip. So when we had our little meeting before we got back to the cars, I didn't single that particular climber out, but I talked at some length about, even if you have leaders who are way more experienced than you saying, this is a good idea. If you feel it's not right, all you have to do is say, this doesn't feel good to me. And then let them ask you why, because they may be able to ask the right questions to get that knowledge out of you. And you might save the whole team, which is exactly what happened with that assistant leader. Because within a minute, her reasoning was so good. Her gut feeling was so good. I was so wrong for wanting to keep going. But it was her speaking up and feeling, I don't even know what you said that got me on this tangent, but.
Well, because I said that, these assumptions are what I think are leading people to be reluctant to speaking up. And also,
right. It's the speaking up. That was the thing. So it's that when people don't feel like they're safe to speak up, you lose incredible knowledge. And I've personally witnessed this. And if we had kept on going because she hadn't said anything, or she said, okay, instead of even being willing to say, I don't have a great feeling about this, but we could have gotten on that glacier. We could have had a crevasse fall, which they just happen. You can't avoid them. We could have had a broken ankle inside a crevasse, which just happened. You can't avoid them. And we could have had all of us trying to keep our injured climber warm while they were soaking wet in 30-mile-an-hour winds on a glacier in the middle of nowhere. Someone could have died if she had not been willing to speak up.
Well, and I think there's an assumption, a lot of people, and I think we see this because we're seeing it play out on social media in the comment sections and that sort of thing, where someone tries to speak up and then people who disagree descend on you, right? But at the same time, what I found interesting, we had in this discussion within the community was, social media has its downsides, and it gets there's no question that it's addictive. There's no question that it has created this kind of tribalist, feeling out online. You know what I mean? But what was interesting was several of the ladies shared stories where what they saw someone speak up. They saw someone share a different opinion. And even though there were some people that descended on them and told them how wrong they were, they went and they were like, you know what, I'm going to reach out to this person and give them the encouragement that, yes, you spoke up. I agree with you. You're not alone. And granted, it would be, I think a lot of us would appreciate it, especially, I have a tendency to like share my opinion.
Really?
And
On live
I'll get,
streams?
yeah, well, just in general. And then I get called out. And it would be nice that other people would publicly call me out, or not call me out, but like support me. However, it is just as good just to know that there are people out there that support me, and that I'm not alone, and that I'm not losing my mind. And then through making those connections, you actually appreciate that more because it's someone who has your back. You know what I mean? So even if you're getting attacked online, who cares about online world? Online world is fake world. We're talking about like what really matters are the relationships that you make in real life and that are close to you, especially in your like immediate community. Because when you really need support, those are the people that you need to support you, not someone who drops a comment on some post that they don't like on the internet. You know what I mean? Like, who cares? Of course, I'm not a people pleaser. So that's the sort of thing that doesn't really affect me. And if you are a person that is sensitive or is a people pleaser or whatever, you know what I mean? Or you just don't like confrontation, I would still tell you, fine, you don't have to jump on that bandwagon and protect them online, but reach out to them, send them a DM, tell them that you support them. If you're walking by someone, and this is like stories that we shared, and you see that they're wearing something, or they have a hobby, or there's something that triggers you to be like, oh, I think I might connect with that person, then tell them. Like, get out of your comfort zone and tell them. And the next thing you know, you might have a friend. And I think it's something that is very valuable and that people need right now. So it's a challenge because, people think I'm an extrovert. I'm actually not. I'm fine working from home in my bubble by myself. I like myself. I think I'm good company. I'm okay with it. So it's been in the last few years where I have made a conscious decision and effort to reach out and make connections and reach out to like-minded women, because it dawned on me that I cannot possibly be the only one. To think that I'm the only one that's experiencing this would be so self-involved. Yeah. And that's why I ultimately decided, I was like, there has to be others out there. I'm going to put myself out there, and hopefully they find me, and we can create our own community that allows people to speak up and push back. Because what I want is for these ladies not to have a debate, because that's about winning, but is to have a dialogue. And then at the end of the day, if there's something and there's a sticking point and we don't agree on it, that's cool. We don't have to agree on it. We can still hang out and have a glass of wine together. Like, it's not the end of the world.
I love it. So Libertas Sisters is the website. I have it up there on the live stream.
I have it on my mug. Where's my camera? There we go.
Oh, that's so classy. I only have a glass of water here. I should get better at that. I have the beer.
You do have your t-shirt. You also have your t-shirt on.
Oh, right. That's true. Well, Meseidy, thanks for being on the live stream. And folks, if this sounds interesting at all, you can go find out more at Libertas Sisters, or you can go find Meseidy at handle. It's Meseidy.
Yeah, because they're like, how do you say your name? It's Meseidy.
It's Meseidy. Talk to you later, folks.
Bye.